This is video 701 and it corresponds with section 7.1 in your textbook, and it's called Life is Cellular. In this section we'll talk a little bit about the cell theory, and then we will also talk about the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So what is the smallest part of any living thing, and it's so small but it's still counted as being alive? That's right. It's going to be the cell. So the cell is the smallest living unit of any organism. So remember before, and probably in chemistry, you learned that atoms were the smallest living unit of matter. Well, cells are the smallest living unit of organisms. So as far as the discovery of cells, there was the invention of the microscope. And Robert Hooke used an early compound microscope to look at living or non-living thin slices of cork, which is a plant material. So if you look where the arrow just popped up, that's where you put the organism. And here, the second arrow, that's what you look through. Okay? So under the microscope, he saw all these tiny little chambers, and he called them cells because they reminded him of the cells that the monks stayed in at the time. And cell is a term that we still use in biology. But we also know that living cells are not empty chambers, but they've got all kind of organelles. They might have a nucleus in there, ribosomes, and many other different organelles. The picture on the right is a picture of cork, and if you remember from our lab, that was one of the questions I believe I asked you, was why would a cork cell look empty? So with the early microscope, Anton Leeuwenhoek examined pond water and other things, and he also took a sample taken from the mouth. And this over here, this picture, is a picture of his lab book and what he wrote down. So the organisms he saw in the mouth are what we call bacteria today. So you got rod-shaped ones down here, you've got circular-shaped ones, and rod-shaped ones up there also. So what exactly is the cell theory? Well, there's basically three parts of the cell theory, and there were a couple scientists that contributed to this cell theory, and one of those scientists was Matthias Schleiden, and he is famous for concluding that all plants are made of cells. So he studied plants, and he knows that all plants were made of cells, and that was in 1838. So if you remember, when was that microscope invented? That's right, in the 1600s. That's with Robert Hooke. Okay, and then the next year, and still in the 1800s, there was a biologist, Theodor Schwann. He stated that all animals were made of cells. And then thirdly, a German physician, Dr. Rudolf Virchow, concluded that new cells only came from the division of existing cells. So they did, experiments to come up with these tenets, but these are the three tenets for the cell theory. So the first thing is that all living things are made up of cells. Secondly, cells are the basic unit of all living things. And then thirdly, new cells are produced from existing cells. All living things are made of cells. Cells are the basic unit, and new cells are produced from existing cells. So those are the three parts of the cell theory. It's very important that you remember those. Now, when we look at types of cells, we pretty much have just the prokaryotic cell and the eukaryotic cell. We are made up of eukaryotic cells, and bacteria are made up of prokaryotic cells. So you should have done your table probably by now, or you get ready to do your table on the organelles, and these are things that you probably already know. But the main differences between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell is that prokaryotic cells do not have their genetic material in a nucleus. Eukaryotic cells do. The prefix pro means first, so they think that prokaryotic cells may have been the first cells. And then the prefix eu, EU, means true. And then karyo means cell, all right, or kernel. So with prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, the prokaryotic cells are very, very small. So when I say bacteria, you should know that that is a prokaryotic cell. In contrast, you have some eukaryotic cell, like this amoeba down on the bottom right, that can be 1,000 micrometers in diameter, which is large enough to be seen without a microscope. So cells fall into two categories depending on whether they contain a nucleus. And remember, nucleus are the ones with eukaryotes, and prokaryotes are the ones without. But you must remember that all cells have DNA and have a cell membrane. All cells have DNA and a cell membrane. Doesn't matter if they're prokaryotic or eukaryotic. So here's a picture of an animal cell on the left, a plant cell, in the middle, plant cell on the right, and then your prokaryotic cell on the left. So you can see that eukaryotic cells are a little bit more complex. They've got a lot more going on inside of them. And then they also are larger than the prokaryotic cell. Okay? So prokaryotes are generally smaller and simpler than eukaryotic cells, but they still grow, they still reproduce, they do all those characteristics of life. Okay? And organisms that we call bacteria are prokaryotic. So all bacteria are prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells, on the other hand, are larger and more complex, and they have dozens of structures and internal membranes. So they have, that endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus, and then you have your mitochondria, you have your chloroplast. Those all have internal membranes inside of the organelle. And eukaryotes can be highly specialized. So one eukaryotic cell might be a bone cell. Another eukaryotic cell might be a nerve cell. That's what we're talking about when I say that they are highly specialized. So there's many types of cell or animals, organisms that are eukaryotics: plants, animals, fungi, protists. So that pretty much ends section 7.1. Let's look at the review questions. All right, so the answer is B on that one. Who was that? Right, that was Hooke. Third question. You remember the electron microscopes? Okay. That's right. Light microscopes cannot be used to examine thin tissue. You have to use an electron one. And then last, which organism listed is a prokaryote? That's right, B, bacterium. That is singular for bacteria. And the last one, okay, hope you got those right. And that ends this one here. Let me find out where to stop this at.